of the injury that it's not a big deal?
Well, I mean, anytime, someone who wants to pitch as badly as Marcus does, gets a report from a doctor and an image that forces him to miss any time, it's going to be something that is significant enough to put him on the IL. But, he's supremely confident. We are in his desire to be back on the field. And, if there's a timeline that is a week or a week to week situation, we know this isn't days, but big picture, long term, this is not anything he or we are concerned about, but we want to get him back as quickly as possible and as safely as possible.
Long term in the context of the 60-game season or in the context of his career?
Well, I think the latter for sure. And anytime in a 60-game season, anytime you miss any game, it's a significant amount of the percentage of games. But again, our hope and expectation is that he's going to be able to come back from this 100%. We're hoping that sooner rather than later, and that we have no doubt he's going to be able to make an impact for us this year.
Thank you.
The next question comes from Disha Dozar.
Hey, Brodie. Do you know who's going to be on your 3-player taxi squad?
Not yet. Disha, we start at home, obviously with our first 3 games at the Braves, and then we only have a two-game road trip to start out before coming right back for 2. So we haven't decided on that. I'm sure some of that will be dictated how the first 3 games go, but we'll be talking about that over the course of the weekend.
And then now that camp wrapped up and you saw both performances from Piniella and Diaz, do you still view Diaz as your closer, or maybe would you consider giving more of those 9th innings to Piniella?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I would go back to what I said earlier regarding Jimenez and Steve's question about sort of what our purpose here is to win every single game. And we recognize the priority of and the importance of each of these games. So Louis is going to be able to utilize these guys in the right situation at the right moment based on the right availability in the matchups. So we're going to try to keep away from defined roles, but we've got confidence in Diaz. He's done it. He's accomplished it at this level, and he's pitching with great confidence. I know you all saw it in his last outing. Piniella has been, a completely different pitcher in this summer camp than what he was last year. And the work that these 2 guys have put in has paid off. And I would put Dylan Betances in that same conversation. All 3 of these guys had a lot of work to prepare themselves to get them to this point. And I know we've got confidence in all of these guys to pitch in the highest leverage situations there are. Thanks, Steve.
Our next question comes from Tony DeComo.
Hey, Brodie. I've got a couple on the roster. Regarding Jimenez, you've said many times that obviously you want to win now, but you also point consistently to winning in the future. This does have implications on the future. So why is now, opening day, the right time to call him up?
Well, look, I don't know that it ultimately has or doesn't have implications on the future beyond a couple of things. He has options, and he would be optioned to the AAA or to the summer camp alternative site if he did not make the team. But our purpose is to put him on that roster for opening day. He can help us. And as we go forward, time will tell in terms of how that evolves. But we don't have the benefit of a AAA development year. He doesn't have the benefit of getting 140 games in the minor leagues to continue his progression as a major league ready player. But we do think there's aspects of his game that are 100% ready to compete at this level, and we think that he'll continue to get development here. And so from a short-term and long-term plan, Tony, we've got a guy who can help us now and a guy who can potentially help us for 6 years.
Also, when you look at the roster construction, you won't be obviously pinch hitting for the pitcher this year. So what is the benefit of having 7 bench players when maybe you could have potentially had more relievers instead or mixed it up differently?
Yeah, well, I think that as we look at the start, we've got what do we put? We have 14 pitchers on the roster, 4 starters that we expect to be in the rotation, and then with the rest of the guys, we have 10 available pitchers. Until we have that 5th starter need. So I think that's kind of the way we constructed the roster and thinking about it, that we do have 10 available relievers, and we felt like having some additional versatility, both defensively, offensively, and then also on the bases. As we look at, Marisnik and Nunez and Jimenez, those are 3 pinch running options that Louis will have at his disposal throughout the game.
Also, one more quick one, and then I'll get out of the way. What was the updated diagnosis when Jed Lowry saw the doctor this week? And I know Louis mentioned a second opinion. where does he stand in general here?
Yeah, well, first I'll just talk about sort of what he's been feeling, and we've talked about a progression. We saw a different Jed Lowry in summer camp than what we saw in spring training 1.0. He was able to do a lot more. He was participating in inter squad games in a way that he hadn't previously. The goal was to push him and for him to be able to kind of test his limits, running the bases, running out of the batter's box, and then being able to have some mobility defensively. As he progressed into that, his pain threshold increased. So we wanted to get a fresh look at his knee. We wanted to get a look at his calf and his Achilles and everything in that left side that you guys have heard about in the past. We wanted to get a look at that, get fresh images, and try to get a better diagnosis for what is causing that pain and his limitations going forward. The short version is we're still searching for those answers. We don't have a very clear-cut picture. That's the purpose of going to getting a second opinion. And with that information, we'll be able to develop an action plan and have a better idea of what his availability will be going forward.
So just to be clear, that you did not, whatever test he got, MRI or whatever, you did not receive a diagnosis from the doctor of what the issue is?
Yeah, it's a little inconclusive at this point of what is effectively causing that type of pain. Yeah, so it's inconclusive at this point, Tom.
Thank you.
Yep, you got it.
Our next question comes from Tim Britton.
Hey, Brodie, I'm wondering, with creating a 30-man roster, how difficult and how much more complex is handling your 40-man roster when you don't have maybe as much room for guys to be on the 40-man but not on the active roster?
Yeah, Tim, I think that's a really, really good question because, we have to wrestle with a 40-man roster and a 30-man that is not for the entire season. We're going to have 30 for 2 weeks, 28. Uh-oh. That Ethan, that you? 30-man, 28 in 2 weeks, and then goes down to 26, obviously, for the remainder of the year. So that's a bit of a challenge that we do have to think carefully about every move that we make, while also going back to the putting the best team on the field right now. Obviously, every team has to think about keeping the best 40-man spots at any given time. We have the flexibility to go forward. We have guys, when we take a guy off the roster like Steven Gonzalez, it's never easy, but we'll have to make those tough decisions as we go into it deeper in the season.
And this is a time of year, in a normal year, with a lot of guys getting designated for assignment. There's a lot of movements and some small trades for teams. How fluid do you expect the acquisitions to be, considering how weird it would be to bring a new player in this environment?
You mean right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's tough. We haven't had the benefit of scouting players who are in summer camp. We haven't had the benefit of seeing a full spring training going back to March, and we've had guys that have had in 4 months off effectively with varying degrees of resources and facilities to work out at. So that's definitely a challenge. We know the guys we have in camp. As you saw yesterday, we added a couple more to our pool. We'll get a better handle on where they are physically, but we'll continue to try to be smart in adding guys that can help us to this pool and do so with the best information we can.
And then finally, how much did you consider David Peterson for a spot on the 30-man, knowing there are some 40-man moves you would have to make for that?
Yeah, he's had a great spring training. He's had a great summer camp. I think he's showing us that this guy has major league ability. And as you noted, in a shortened season with a 30-man roster, he's one of our most talented pitchers. So we're going to have to consider him at whatever point that makes the most sense.
Thanks.
Sure.
The next question comes from Justin Toscano.
Hey, Brodie, Louis was telling us that he would keep reassessing on Ramos' situation up to opening day. What's your understanding of where he's at with the opener in about 24 hours?
Yeah, he's doing really well. I mean, he was on site on Tuesday, and then he played in the game yesterday as the DH. He was back on premises this morning, throwing the bases, running the bases. So we've got a high degree of confidence. You saw he's on the active roster, and we have a high degree of confidence that he's going to be available for Louis opening day. And when Louis sets his lineup, I think there's a strong possibility he'll be in.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Andy Martino.
Brodie, by pretty much all accounts, your players and your staff have done a good job staying on top of the health and safety protocols so far. With news seeming pretty good on that, with a lot of negative tests coming league-wide with players. With it being smooth so far, do you have any concerns as the leader of the organization that you got to remind everyone to keep it tight and shore that up especially as travel starts? And do you have any concerns about travel into a country that's obviously where the virus is still exploding?
I said, if you go back to when summer camp first started, I used the word commitment. And I think that is something that we tried to maintain through the 3 weeks of this summer camp, is that we just have to make a continued commitment to our behavior to keep us as safe as possible. I think the guys did a tremendous job, as I said earlier, did a tremendous job regulating themselves. I've got confidence that we as an organization and our players and coaches will keep that mindset as we go forward, as well as on the road. We can only control the behavior that we personally do and that we hold each other accountable for within the organization. It's our hope and expectation that the other teams will do the same around the city, around the league. And look, at this point, as I said earlier, we have an opening day. That was something that was in question for a period of time. And I know our experience going to Yankee Stadium was a positive one. Our experience going through our first exhibition game at home was a positive one. And we're all going to have to work together. It's going to be a partnership between Major League Baseball, the Players Association, and every one of the teams like us to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep each other safe in an environment that we know is challenging.
For your organization, keeping guys from leaving the hotel much on the road, do you feel like you're going to speak to people? I understand it's sort of encouraged and not required for guys to stay in. Where do you stand on that as the GM? Are you going to be strongly encouraging players to not be going out after games and such?
It goes back to the discipline and the self-respect that they've shown over these last 3 weeks. These guys desperately want to play. These guys want to keep themselves and their families safe, and they want to keep their teammates safe. So I do believe that is something that they're going to continue to think about internally, and to, enforcement might be the wrong rule as much as, making sure that people understand the accountability of their actions. And so I anticipate that being a mission for our players this year. I know they've had team meetings on Zooms where they've talked about how they're going to, police each other, for a lack of a better word, but to communicate to each other the importance of everything that we do. And I've got confidence that the leaders on this team will continue to step up and make sure that we don't lapse in our behavior.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Our next question comes from Ed Coleman.
Hey, Brodie. With Cespedes over the last 3 weeks, just what you've observed, do you have a better grasp of the percentage that he might be able to play the outfield for you as opposed to DH?
Yeah, I think that over the last few days in particular, he's gotten more regular reps in the outfield. And I think he's been getting out there for 3 or 4 innings as we're continuing to build him up and make sure that he's strong enough for, longer stints. But no question about it, he's got the ability and the green light to play the outfield. We'll just have to be smart in terms of how and when we utilize him to make sure that we're not asking too much of him in the early going of the season. Thanks.
Our next question comes from Mark Carrig.
Hey, Brodie. There's a thought out there that because of the way the season is structured and all the various challenges that, managers are going to have their hands full, like even experienced ones. Even you were talking about roles not being as defined, manager might have to step in there and, make some calls. Like, what gives you the confidence with what you've seen from Louis that, he'll be able to do that, make these moves and, especially when some of them can be kind of difficult for, like, say, a veteran player to hear, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the 2 primary reasons that Louis was the right fit for this team at this moment was his baseball aptitude of making decisions within the lines. We believe that his experience running games in the minor leagues, his experience growing up in a baseball family, and his experience with our current team last year are going to give him the tools necessary to make the right in-game decisions and the right lineup choices. When it comes to communication with players, that's the second piece, is that he had the trust and respect of the players, and he'd been able to demonstrate that to them over the years. He knows these guys well, and that's going to be something that we are, putting a lot of confidence in Louis to be able to communicate good, bad, and everywhere in between information to the players. And that's something that I know he's prepared to do.
Our next question comes from Mike Vaccaro.
Hey, Brodie, I'm curious, given all the challenges and obstacles you guys faced starting, 3 weeks ago, whenever camp started, as you sit here on the precipice of the season, are you kind of amazed or surprised that we're actually here?
I'm proud. Mike, I think that this is something that, when we first got a 67-page document and then a 100+ page document outlining these protocols, a lot of people looked at it and said, wow, this is going to be a pretty daunting task. But we didn't, and I've said this before too, we didn't talk about how hard it was going to be. We talked about, okay, let's start doing. Let's put our action steps in place. Let's not wait until we have an announcement of when the season's going to start. Let's prepare in this downtime as best we possibly could to be ready for it. So I'm proud of the efforts that everybody put in, and I'm very, very pleased that the entire game has been able to accomplish this, and now we get to go make a run of it.
On a separate note, I know everybody else is wondering this too. Did you realize that Pete had a dog named Brodie?
I did. Yes, I'd like to claim that I had something to do with it, but it predated our dinner in Arizona a couple of years ago, and he and Haley had that dog beforehand. But I like to just say that it was fate. It's fate that brought us together.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Justin Walters.
Hey, Brodie, hope all is well with you and your family. You mentioned the cardboard fans earlier. Not every team has adopted that new atmosphere, if you'd call it that. Why did the Mets want to make sure they felt that their fans were still a part of this new norm? And do you plan to add more fans over the course of the season, or cardboard cutouts?
Well, I hope we add more fans over the course of the season that aren't just cardboard cutouts. I hope our television audiences continue to grow. I know a lot of people tuned in over the weekend to watch us in the exhibition games, but creating an energy in the ballpark is something that's important for us. I know the guys got a little bit of an adrenaline rush with the production that we put on Saturday at home, and we're going to try to continue to build that energy. And seeing faces in the stands and seeing real people, seeing Anthony Causey in the photo pit is something that makes this season feel special. And that's something that we'll continue to try to do, whether it's videos, whether it's music, but we want these guys to feel the support, and being able to see real faces of people that have paid money to watch them perform is something that's pretty inspiring.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Mike Puma.
Hey, Brodie, just with the season about to start here, are the Mets the team to beat in the National League East?
We are going to go wire to wire here and not quit, Mike. I think that there's so much unpredictable, or there's going to be so many variables that are going to dictate success or failure in this season. We've already seen the challenges of adversity, not only with our team but around the league, and we believe and expect that we should be able to contend. We know that every team is feeling that way in a shortened season, but it's going to be our belief that we should win and can win on every night. So let's go do it.
So if you don't make the playoffs this year, will this year be a failure, you think?
I'm not going to define success or failure by any one definition. Our mission is to win now and win in the future. That hasn't changed. We won 86 games last year. We want to make the playoffs this year. We want to win a lot more games than we lose this year, and we want to do that every year. We want to give the fans the same excitement level that we experienced last year towards the stretch, is that every year they go into it believing we have a chance to make the playoffs, and we want to deliver them a championship. It's a very simple effort. And until we accomplish that goal, we won't be satisfied.
Next question comes from Disha Thozar.
Hey, Brodie, just one more from me. Maybe this isn't a decision for right now, but if Familia, Diaz, and Betances become the force that you hope they are, and Stroman's injury ends up being more of a long-term thing, would you consider moving Seth Lugo into the rotation somewhere down the line?
We'll be looking at a lot of creative solutions. If you think back to spring training 1.0, there was talk that we had too many starters, and how were we going to navigate the fifth starter? Would we use 6? Would we use an opener? I think, if Stroh's going to be down for, obviously a first couple of turns through the rotation, we're going to have to be creative to put our best foot forward. Seth has the ability to be a starter. Robert Kesselman has the ability to be a starter. Realistically, though, they're going to have to build up their pitch counts and innings to be able to throw, more than a couple innings at a time. So we'll have to factor that in. Do we use an opener? It's going to depend on, you mentioned those three bullpen arms. Everything's going to be on the table to try to win these games. And when Stroh's spot comes up in the rotation, we'll use that same mentality to try to figure out how to dispose or use our pitching ranks to the best we can. And that's a lot of the names that have been talked about on this call, whether they're on the roster or not on the roster. We're not going to hold back and try to make our best play that day.
Thanks.
Next question comes from Jerry Beach.
Hey, Brodie, kind of piggyback on that question about Seth. Could you envision structuring the rotation so that the guys who throw the fewest innings are aligned so that Seth can provide the most multi-inning outings as possible for him?
I think we're going to let the situation dictate that, and depending on who's available that particular night, who's thrown back-to-back days versus who's going to be down that particular night, we're going to have to adjust on the fly and utilize our best pitchers as often as we can. And he's one of those guys. So we'll continue to operate that. If we need 2 innings out of him, that's great. If we've used Familia, Betances, Justin Wilson, Diaz, Paul Sewell, Corey Oswalt, Jason Shreve, Hunter Strickland, we're going to use all these guys, and they're all prepared to be ready at any point in time. And I know Seth has had the history of being able to go multi-innings, and that's a big value add for us. And whether that comes at the start of a game, whether that comes in inning 2, 3, 4, or whether it's the 8th and the 9th, he's going to be ready to go be the dominant force that he was last year.
And obviously, a lot's happened since you guys last played a game that counted. Beyond opening day taking place in July as opposed to March or April, is the anticipation for tomorrow any different than it usually is in more normal years?
The last 4 months have been such a challenge. I mean, there's been stress. There's been all of us stuck at home. There's been friends and loved ones affected by a virus. There's been social injustice that we've had to witness and face and try to create change. This has been a tough 4 months. The fact that baseball is going to start tonight and for us tomorrow is something that many of us have been hoping and rooting for all this time. And to be able to give that to ourselves, to be able to give it to the healthcare workers and the families that have had such devastation over these last few months is something that we're excited to be able to do. As an industry, we feel a responsibility to do our part to make this country better. And tonight and tomorrow gives baseball a chance to do that. Thanks, Jerry.
Next question is from Lloyd Carroll.
Hey, Brodie. It's funny. I know we're just worried about getting started this season, but pretty soon you're going to have an August 31 trade deadline. Normally that involves minor league prospects, but if there are no minor leagues going, how will there be trades? I'm just curious how that's going to be dealt with.
Yeah, it almost feels like there's 2 trade deadlines. This would be the normal period of the trade deadline. And I think when you see all the transactions that have happened, even the 2 that we made yesterday, we're always, Hunter Strickland came into summer camp with us, and who hadn't been with us before, he was an addition to the team. So we're always going to be in talent acquisition mode to help this team win. Where we are today versus where we are in 30 days is going to dictate a lot of our moves, as well as dictating a lot of our needs. But we're not going to lose sight of putting ourselves in a position to win this year, and also strategically having a plan to build a team that can contend every year going forward.
Our next question comes from Tim Britton.
Is it weird that opening day is tomorrow and we don't know for sure how many playoff teams there are going to be?
Well, we want to win the division. I don't think we can look at anything other than what's been prepared for us right now. When we started back in February, I don't think we could have envisioned a season where we had 40 games against the NL East and 20 games against the AL East. This was supposed to be our AL West year. So, we're not going to be looking at anything other than what's been presented to us, and with the intent to try to win as many games as possible, with the division being our goal. And anything else will obviously adjust, but it's not going to change our focus.
Thanks.
Our next question comes from Mike Vaccaro.
Brodie, along those lines, though, I mean, obviously those negotiations are ongoing today. Just beyond what it means for the Mets, I mean, are you in favor of the ability for baseball to expand playoffs, even if it's just a temporary experimental kind of thing?
I love baseball. You know, I think that the fact that we get to play it now is something that it's a huge positive in all of our lives. I love playoff baseball. I love meaningful baseball games, and we got a taste of that last year. This feels like a pennant race right now. You know, everybody's in first place, everybody's in last place, but we all are going after it with a chance to try to win games. And if that means, you know, making the playoffs as is currently constructed, or if it means, you know, more baseball in October, you know, we would welcome any and all meaningful games. At least that's my perspective, and that's something that we'll hope to find out as we go forward.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Jared Diamond.
Hey, Brodie. So when baseball returned after this layoff in Japan and in Korea, there was a huge rash of injuries in that first 2-3 weeks back, guys pulling hamstrings, maybe not built up. I'm wondering how much you guys followed that and sort of how concerned you are of that coming here these first couple of weeks.
Yeah, the first question, the first challenge is trying to identify what players had access to during the time off. And each player was in a different solution or different scenario where they had different solutions and facilities to use. So our performance department was in touch with everybody on a daily basis, but injuries are always part of a year, part of a season. Soft tissue injuries at a time where we've ramped up quickly, has a possibility of being a reality too. So we focused on arm care, we focused on workload management, and with a completely different model, with a 3-week test where inter-squad games were starting literally day 2 or day 3 of our camp, we've worked with our data scientists, we've worked with our PTs to make sure that we're trying to upload these guys as best as possible, knowing that we're in unknown charter waters as we go forward.
Thank you.
Brodie, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, everybody. See you out there tomorrow.